Now then, when anyone ever talks about a US-UK trade deal after we leave the EU, it's not long before someone mentions chlorinated chicken and hormone-injected beef. Broadly speaking, the Americans don't seem to mind it, but we do. This morning on the Today programme, the American ambassador, Woody Johnson, said that description of American food wasn't fair and that the US had the lowest level of food poisoning. Here's what he said.
If I had my choice between chicken that was clean and safe and it didn't have poisons on it, I would take the one that had been cleaned sufficiently. Most Americans would feel that our food is safe and cost-effective and humane.
Right, well, there was Woody Johnson. He also said that the US had the lowest level of food poisoning. So is he right? Joining us is Eric Millstone, who's Emeritus Professor of Science Policy at the University of Sussex and an expert on food safety policy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Does America have a very low level of food poisoning?
I think the ambassador has been misinformed. There are multiple ways in which you can estimate the incidence of food poisoning, but all the figures that I've been looking at and my expert colleagues have been looking at suggest that rates of food poisoning in the US are significantly higher than they are in the UK and in the European Union as a whole.
So is there any reason you could understand how he ends up in thinking that they are so good?
Maybe he believes the brief that's been prepared for him in Washington, D.C.
OK, but what's the point of washing a chicken in chlorine if you can't solve the food poisoning?
OK, it is the case that US livestock production packs a lot more animals into a given space. They're much closer together. And in those circumstances, the opportunities for infections to pass between animals is much, much greater. And as a consequence, there are high levels of infections within the livestock. The animals often get treated with high doses of antibiotics. Indeed, over the last 10 years, the use of antibiotics in livestock in the US has approximately doubled, whereas in Europe it's approximately halved. So the European system is much cleaner. But the Americans are prepared to tolerate infections in their livestock, and they say, well, we'll clean it up at the end by spraying it. Well, not just with chlorinated water, but also 5 other chemical disinfectants.
Okay.
But the evidence that emerged from a study at the University of Southampton last spring is that, sadly, the chemical washes are ineffective. All they seem to be doing is making it harder for laboratories to detect the presence of the bacteria. It doesn't kill the bacteria, it doesn't weaken them, it doesn't diminish them. It leaves them present and just as virulent.
So just briefly, who has the higher animal welfare standards?
Animal welfare standards, as well as hygiene standards, are much higher in the European Union and the UK than they are in the US. But US food standards are much weaker than the EU standards in numerous respects. Not merely do they use more antibiotics, use massively more pesticides, permit high residues, and there are many, many respects in which European and UK food safety standards and animal welfare standards and environmental protection standards are far higher than those that the US are prepared to tolerate.
Professor Eric Millstone, thank you very much.